I should say. So we spoke about genetic bottlenecks in the human race last week. We identified a couple. We talked about mitochondrial Eve. We talked about Y chromosomal Adam. If you don't recall or might maybe miss the show, please go back to the archives and just have a listen there. But you can go back to any even 100 or any 100 numbered show, and you'll find the information there. But there were bottlenecks, okay, and significant bottlenecks where we have one for mitochondrial Eve about 140,000 years ago, and in the male line gives us Y chromosomal Adam at about 60 to 90,000 years ago. That's a fair stretch, but that's what we have ascertained so far. Now, that leads us to other bottlenecks in the animal population, specifically mammals. Some evidence points to genetic bottlenecks in other animals in the wake of the Toba eruption. We talked about the Toba eruption, which was one of the bottlenecks. The populations of Eastern African chimpanzees, Bornean orangutans, Central Indian macaques, the cheetah, the tiger, and the separation of the nuclear gene pools of Eastern and Western lowland gorillas all recovered from very low numbers around 70,000 years ago. Okay. Now, this does not mean that humanity started at that point in time, though it might have, but rather that human variety was severely curtailed, and maybe there were many more species, maybe blue-skinned, maybe green, maybe some that were one-eyed, maybe some that were very large, while others might have been very small. We know that there were blue-skinned people. That's crazy talk, Mackie. No, it's actually a genetic defect. There are blue-skinned people. If you don't believe me, do your own research. It was actually in the States where the last case was known about 100 years ago, and they truly had a bluish skin, right? Some people might have had green skin, and look, we look at these myths and legends, these ogres, these humanoid creatures, trolls, etc., dwarves. I think it's racial memory of other species of humans that coexisted. We know that Homo forensis was very small. They're like the adult, specimens of that species, or well, Homo sapiens they were, really, not a separate species, and were only 4 feet tall. Only 4 feet tall. And we know that some hominids, maybe even Homo sapiens, were very, very tall, 7 to 8 feet, maybe 9 feet for some of them. Okay? So we know the human race, and we learn this as we go along, and over the last 10 years, it has changed a lot. The landscape of the evolutionary tree, as they like to call it, for the human species, has changed significantly. Neanderthal is no longer considered an ancestor. Neanderthal is now an interbreeding species. Denisovan man, a couple of others we haven't identified yet, but we know they are there because we have genetic fragments that don't fit anywhere else. Again, Homo forensis. And they were only discovered, this century. Mm-hmm. This century. Okay, a whole new species well, not species, a whole new race of humans. Now, we have ample proof, though, that the human family was much more diverse, even as little as 10,000 years ago. And I'm talking again, about some of the species. A mysterious small human species coexisted with modern man in China until at least 10,500 years ago. Scientists have announced, based on an analysis of an anomalous thigh bone found in a cave. The discovery brings the number of human species coexisting until very recently to 3, at least. Us, this new one, and the so-called hobbit, the Homo floresiensis, that survived on the Indonesian island of Flores until at least 13,000 years ago, at least. To put this in perspective, around when saber-toothed tigers and mammoths were going extinct in the late Ice Age, and agriculture was beginning to develop in the Levant, which is the Middle East, at least 3 types of humans were roaming the planet, at least. The thigh bone found in Red Deer Cave in Yunnan province is about 14,000 years old and is substantially different from a modern man's. Professor Darren Curnow of the University of New South Wales and Professor Ji Zhu-Ping of the Yunnan Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology report in PLOS 1. Other remains from the same mysterious species found nearby date to 10,500 years ago. The thigh bone is more similar to those possessed by Homo habilis and early Homo erectus, which predated man by some 1.5 million years, than to man itself.
That's crazy.
Interestingly, and then I'll throw to my esteemed colleague, interestingly, the book Forbidden Archaeology by Kramer et al., as well as Devolution, highlight the possibility that humanity might be a great deal older. But both books, are usually derided by mainstream science, even though, and this is interesting, even though their scholarly qualities are not questioned, nay, they are praised. What a scholarly work they produce. The information is complete rubbish, but good Lord, it's scholarly, right? It's an extremely dry read. So if you have the time and patience to read both Forbidden Archaeology and Devolution, do yourself a favor and do. But it does take patience. However, it's really full of gold. They cite, that's Kramer et al., they cite a great many anomalies in the fossil record and show documented evidence of artifacts and tools and Homo sapiens bones appearing in geological strata they should not. And we're talking about like tens and in some cases hundreds of millions of years potentially ago. However, when the dating is not in line with what the establishment wants, the offending scientist either self-censors or is barred from the scientific community. Nonsense, Mackie, that never happens. No, science is all about progress and finding the truth. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. If you really go against the establishment, even in a smallish way, and Dave is going to share with us what that means, in a smallish way, you will still likely lose your career. You will still probably be barred from further scientific discourse, and your peers will withdraw from you because you don't toe the line, because money is at stake, tenures are at stake, careers are at stake, reputations are at stake, God forbid. Reputation, who cares? It's about science and truth. No, it isn't. But Dave, tell us why it isn't.
Yeah, I know this is your favorite one. It also is for me too. And I want to reiterate that going rogue with data is not acceptable, and here's a great example. So data rejection, inconvenient dating in Mexico. And it's not the Mexican Tinder, no.
Oh, ay caramba!
Oh boy, there's a hate mail. Critical race theory. So there is the high-profile case of Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre, a geologist working for the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, who was dispatched to an archaeological site in Mexico to date a group of artifacts in the 1970s. This travesty also illustrates how far established scientists will go to guard orthodox tenets. McIntyre used state-of-the-art equipment and backed up her results by using 4 different methods. But her results were off the chart. And the chart is the established history of mankind. That chart. The lead archaeologist expected a date of 25,000 years or less. And the geologist's finding was 10 times that, 250,000 years or more of the age of the artifacts. These controversial findings are orders of magnitude older than the scientific consensus for habitation of the New World, which generally traces widespread human migration to the New World to 13 to 16,000 years ago. The findings at, can you pronounce that for me?
Huyatlaco.
You just do that like you've read it 1,000 times. Have mostly been repudiated by the larger scientific community and have seen only occasional discussion in the literature. The figure of 25,000 years or less was critical to the Bering Strait crossing theory, and it was the motivation behind the head archaeologist tossing Steen McIntyre's results in the circular file, which is the floor bin next to your desk, and asking for a new series of dating tests. This sort of reaction does not occur when dates match the expected chronological model that supports accepted theories. Wow. Steen McIntyre was given a chance to retract her conclusions, but she refused. She found it hard thereafter to get her papers published, and she lost a teaching job at an American university. I want to also say that there's hearsay only, that the team working on it were forced to sign affidavits at gunpoint, saying that the soil was disturbed, but the strata proved to be accurate. In fact, Meki, something that I know we're going to get into it, but something I think needs to be understood is that her method was solid. In fact, gridding the dig site and documentation was her such a specialty that no one at the time was doing it. She did it, and now it's the accepted norm.
Mm-hmm. That's not where the story ends, though, right? There were further findings on the subject, because you could say, well, she made a mistake. She made a mistake. She didn't want to admit it, and off she goes. So let's forget about it. It's all on her. But that could be the story, right? Right? Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Not the story. This is what happened. Biostratigraphic researcher. Let me say that again. Biostratigraphic researcher. Cool word, right? Sam Van Landingham published 2 peer-reviewed analyses that confirm the earlier findings of circa 250,000 years before the present for the tool-bearing strata at Huaylatlaco. His 2004 analysis found that Huaylatlaco samples could be dated to the Sangamonian interglacial period, roughly 80,000 to 220,000 years before the present, by the presence of multiple diatom species, one of which first appeared during this era, and others that went extinct by the era's end. So it's a fairly good marker, right? Van Landingham's 2006 paper refined and confirmed his 2004 findings, yet Miss Steen McIntyre was never exonerated. And this, yes, it is part of knowledge now, but the findings still haven't changed. We still talk about 30,000 years for, humans to reach the Americas. And look, that lines up with a few things, sure. But the human race has been on this planet for a lot longer than all of that. And we're finding evidence of that all over the place. Mm-hmm. But this is well within the scope of Homo sapiens existing, if you will. Now, we've already learned last week that Homo sapiens can be dated back reliably by mainstream science to about 300,000 years ago, right? Which gives them 50,000 years to make it from, again, accepted scientific canon, to make it from Africa to the Americas. 50,000 years, or anywhere else in the world for that matter. But no. So ingrained, so caught in their rut are these scientists with their Bering Strait crossing theory, etc., that it is completely unacceptable to even put that forward. And like I said, Cremo and his co-authors found evidence of potential civilization and even, Homo sapiens physical evidence in stratas in America and Europe, but in America, millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of years old. Right?
At the same time as Lucy was found in Africa.
Yeah.
At the same date.
Yeah.
It blew everything that they'd drawn. It blew it out of the water, and then they weren't willing to concede.
No, because, and again, now I believe very strongly that this is a guided decision. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, we are allowed to know certain things, and we are allowed to think certain thoughts within the predetermined frames of our boxes. That's right, exactly. And ultimately, you can say whatever you want in that box. Whatever you like, say whatever you want, because I've already determined the parameters of the box. But God help you, should you step out of that box, because it's not acceptable for a number of reasons. And the funny thing is this, it is only with the death of the leading proponents of theories, funnily enough, that new theories are allowed into the mainstream.
Yeah.
It's really it's astounding. But I tell you what, though, this next one is for you, Dave, as well, because I know that this is really I love this one because it is so telling in what happens in the world. This is the interesting side note, and the Smithsonian acknowledging a problem. This is really, really, really. Forget Steve McIntyre for a second. This one takes the cake, Dave.
Yeah. So just the McIntyre thing, the diatoms. I put a slide up showing what diatoms are, and that they are a giveaway to the age, because they've over time they're found across the planet. They're in waterways, and you can date very successfully if they're not intermixed of various ages in as an intrusion into your dig, into where you're attempting to date. If they're consistent across the strata, then there's no intrusion, and that was proven. So subsequently, and I've seen a whole documentary on diatoms and how they're found everywhere across the planet, and specifically related to the project that we've been researching about the ocean floor sediments being found in Africa in the low-lying areas from the impact that occurred off the coast. So that's where I learned about them initially, is in that research. But then, yes, and they were actually denied by the Smithsonian, the fellow, the head of the Smithsonian, where he ignored it. He just didn't want to know about the diatoms found in the McIntyre dig. Anyway, in 1987, this is the Smithsonian acknowledges problem. Paleontologist Jerry McDonald discovers a wide variety of fossilized tracks from several different species of animals and birds located in Permian strata. Among the various fossilized tracks were clear prints of human foot. However, the Permian strata has been dated from 290 to 248 million years ago, before animals, birds, dinosaurs, and yes, man was supposed to even exist. See what I did there? How then can these prints be explained? In July 1992, some 5 years later, the Smithsonian magazine had an article on these tracks called Petrified Footprints, a puzzling parade of Permian beasts.
Gotta love these alliterations.
I know, I was going to say that too. The magazine acknowledged the mystery, acknowledging what paleontologists like to call problematic. I'm doing air quotes. It described what appeared to be a large mammal and bird tracks evolved long after the Permian period, yet these tracks are clearly a Permian. While it is commendable that McDonald and the Smithsonian clearly acknowledge the existence of these tracks in a strata that contradicts the current evolution theory, it is noteworthy that they highlight only the mammal and birds and not mention the human footprints found with them. Interestingly enough, since these tracks have been discovered, evolutionists have not tried to argue their authenticity or debunk them, nor have they tried to argue that the footprint isn't human. Often they claim that it's a print that just looks like it's human. That's very funny. Their silence is deafening.
And to be clear, so forget the human thing for a second completely. These prints of any of the animals that are there shouldn't exist in the Permian strata. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. The human footprints are just the icing on the cake here, and this was taken from Petrified Footprints: A Puzzling Parade of Permian Beasts by Jerry McDonald, Smithsonian, July 1992, Volume 23, Issue 4, pages 70 to 79. So
you can find it there yourself.
Have a look yourself. So yes, look, we're not making this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. You can't. You can't. You know, it's just it's astounding, and it is ignored though. And this is really, see, this is where I'm baffled. Look, I understand that people want to, protect their careers and their livelihoods. I get it. I mean, you got to pay, your bills, got to put food on the table. I understand all of that. I really do. But these are potentially paradigm-changing discoveries. These are things that would give a completely different view of our place in the cosmos, our development, our age, our purpose, if you will, on this planet, right? I mean, let's say for argument's sake, just for a second here, let's say that these footprints are human footprints. And let's say, for argument's sake, that the Permian strata is in fact that old, and they are in fact real footprints. Mm-hmm. So that would put us, or an iteration of us, to 248 million years ago. 200. It's a number that's completely.
I have to interject. Did you know something really crazy?
No, many crazy. Enlighten me.
Thank you for the opportunity. That all coal was made in the 300 million years ago, in what's called the Carboniferous period.
Correct.
And I've got a slide on the screen that shows these different periods in time. So the Permian here, according to all the timelines, there's only meant to be like kind of corals and stuff, and there's no land creatures. But here we are with fossils that date back to this, showing a footprint and birds, and they're not even supposed to be around until the Jurassic.
Yeah.
The late Jurassic, for that period of time. And, so I think that's really crazy. So the coal thing was something that I was looking at recently, Mackie, and it was that there was no bacteria supposed to have been able to eat the fallen timbers. So they just lay there for, 30 million years, building up. And then the cataclysm occurred, where all the oxygen on the planet was removed through probably a gamma ray burst, and they just smoldered. And that's what all the coal on the whole planet is derived from. It was from that period of time. Mm-hmm. But to know that the Carboniferous period backs onto the Permian, then it's like the Permian is the end of the Carboniferous period, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. They're between cataclysms. So, what? If humans and birds and all these creatures were around then, my goodness me, it's a completely different timeline.
Look, it is, but these numbers, I mean, they boggle the mind. I mean, I dare anyone to visualize and really understand 248 million years. I mean, how many generations is that? It's a lot of generations. That's how many it is. Okay. But of course, let's say for 1 second that we're true. For 1 second, there's a human, or an iteration of a human alive at that time. That would blow evolution completely out of the water, right? And my point here is, now sharks, for instance, crocodiles, another example, who have been around for hundreds of millions of years and haven't really changed that much. They haven't. They've changed in size, right? They're still sharks and crocodiles, though. Then my question is, why can't we be similar? Because the thing is this, right? I mean, let's say for a second that you believe evolution is a thing. That's cool. Adaptation, whatever, right? I believe adaptation is a thing. I don't really believe in a gradual evolution. I believe in punctuated equilibrium.
Yes.
I believe our genes are, programmed a certain way to respond to catastrophes, etc., in a fairly rapid fashion. Like the condor, exactly. I mean, that's a great example. Thank you. Now, why is it so hard to even conceive of the idea that we've been around as long as sharks or crocodiles, for example.
Mm-hmm.
When once a species reaches a certain optimum adaptation, for argument's sake, and you can argue that we have, then why change any further? Why evolve any further? Because if we were truly pushing back our timeline that far, it would open a can of worms larger than the solar system. Because you have to ask yourself, how is it possible that in all that time we did not build civilizations more impressive than the one we have? And the answer, of course, is that we have. Of course we have.
Mm-hmm.
Many times. And we only remember a few. And we were a lot longer lived as well. So there's a lot going on here. And I know, look, people, with pseudoscience and crazy tinfoil crackpots. Yeah, I understand, and people say that, but it doesn't make it true, though.
They can say whatever they want.
Well, that's right.
It's like all those UFO debunkers that have just suddenly shut up.
Yeah, because it turned out to be a thing.
Yeah, it's real. I made my whole career saying they're not real. What do I do now? I don't know.
I can't sit in my armchair anymore. But there's a standard response to evidence that does not fit. And we've given you an example here, and I love it. Now, this is the alleged iron pot in coal. And
yes.
And this is really interesting. So I'll share this with you in toto, and then Dave is going to give us the interlude and a few data points as well. Carbo and other strict creationists, and Carl Bauer is a creationist, right, have claimed that in 1912, an electric company employee in Arkansas broke open a large lump of coal, revealing a man-made iron pot. The original coal bed was reportedly mid-Pennsylvanian age, about 300 million years old by conventional geology. 300 million.
Well, that's when coal was made.
Aha! Exactly right. Bao and others suggested that this finding overturns the standard geologic timetable. The following account is presented on Bao's Creation Evidence website, followed by an advertisement encouraging readers to purchase a cast replica of the pot and nodule, which he describes as 5.5 inches by 6.5 inches long and 4.75 inches tall. So, fairly sizable. The following text is a letter from Frank Kennett, the man who found an iron pot embedded in a large lump of coal. The Creation Evidence Museum has a copy of this letter on file. Sulphur Springs, Arkansas, November 27, 1948. While I was working in the municipal electric plant in Thomas, Oklahoma, in 1912, I came upon a solid chunk of coal, which was too large to use. I broke it with a sledgehammer. This iron pot fell from the center, leaving the impression or mold of the pot in a piece of the coal. Jim Stahl, an employee of the company, witnessed the breaking of the coal and saw the pot fall out. I traced the source of the coal and found that it came from the Wilburton, Oklahoma mines. Signed, Frank J. Kennett, sworn to before me in Sulphur Springs, Arkansas, this 27th day of November, 1948. Julia L. Eldred, NP. My commission expires May 21, 1951. Benton Company. Now, this is the rebuttal. This is the standard response. Listen very carefully. So this is the evidence. This was the letter that had been, witnessed and notarized in order to go with the story. This is the response. One problem with this kind of evidence is that it relies heavily on the veracity and memories of the individuals involved. Since people commonly lie, I repeat this, since people commonly lie or are otherwise fallible in this regard, scientifically, anecdotal evidence is not worth much. One might ask, why would these men, make up such a story? There might be any number of other reasons for gag, attention, etc. However, even if they were telling the truth, as far as they knew it, there is an aspect of the report about which they could be mistaken and on which the significance of the find could rest. That's it. People lie all the time. That's pretty much the rebuttal. And if they don't lie, they're probably wrong. So either they lie or they're wrong. That's it. That's it. That's the evidence that's given in rebuttal of this finding. There are many. This pot is not alone. I want to say here very quickly.
No, it's not. We did a whole show on out of place or artifacts.
Yeah, the OPARTs, I mean, they're legion. Right? Completely ignored though by mainstream science because they are just so far out of what we have become, what we've come to accept as the real thing. And you know what? It's our own written history and our own religious history that is at fault here. Because if you truly believed these numbers, then Christianity, Islam, Judaism, any of the other religions, they would fade into complete insignificance. It would be so there was a guy 2,000 years ago. So there was a guy 5,000 years ago. So there was a guy 1,400 years ago. So what? We go back hundreds of millions of years.
Mm-hmm.
So who are these guys? So it is our own cultural preconceptions that stop us from truly exploring these mysteries with an open mind. With an open mind. And I got to say this very quickly. There's a movie coming out called Moonfall, Dave. I don't know if you've seen the shorts for it or the trailer. You haven't?
No, not yet.
Brother, you're gonna love it.
Mm.
So let's be very clear. It's a science fiction movie. It's coming out pretty soon. Called Moonfall. When I saw the trailer, I thought, you bastards! You've been stealing us blind forever, and now you're making money. Now you're making money off our material yet again. Now this is not exclusively our material, but the storyline of Moonfall is so the moon is getting closer to the Earth. There's this space probe launch to go to the moon, and lo and behold, there is advanced machinery in the hollow moon where our protagonists venture. And Donald Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland's father, right? President Snow from, if you've watched the those movies. He's one of the, I guess, the many-lettered agency's insiders, and he says there have been 5 extinction events in the planet's history, which is right. There were 5 extinction events. And then he goes on to say, well, this one now with the moon coming close to the Earth and causing all these issues, this is number 6.
Wow.
So, yeah, so the moon is hollow. It's an artificial construct. On occasion, well, every 100 million years or so, it comes close to the Earth and causes an extinction level event. And that's the storyline of Moonfall. And I thought to myself, right. Clearly, people are listening to the show, or at least they're taking on, some of the things we're saying. Maybe mainstream culture is finally getting, fay with it. But it's happening. I mean, it's out there. Art is now starting to imitate some of the things that might actually be true. Right now, but Dave, tell us about the interlude, and then give us some maybe some quick data points as well.
Yeah, there are of course problems with dating. They were not the Mexican Tinder site.
Caramba! I can't help myself.
I don't know which way I'm supposed to swipe, but everyone says swipe right. I don't know.
Swipe up.
It's up. Yes, that's it. Let's look at the details. Now, I don't know what it means. 3 critical assumptions can affect the results during radioisotope dating. 1, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known. 2, the amount of parent or daughter elements in the sample has not been altered by processes other than radioactive decay. 3, the decay rate or half-life, as we know it, of the parent isotope has remained constant since the rock was formed. So there's an aside, I highly recommend reading both books, even just for a different point of view. That's Forbidden Archaeology and Devolution. So the quick data point. So humanity might be a lot older than we had previously thought. Well, not entirely true. Eastern cultures, specifically the Indian civilization, has no issues with acknowledging the great antiquity of humanity. The Vedic text, for instance. Talk about the olden times, right? Yeah, crazy. It is the West that is largely subscribed to a linear version of history with an agreed upon dawn some 6 million years ago, the advent of our hominid ancestors. There seem to be, and we have discussed, ample evidence for high civilizations similar in capability to our own and today, and some may be more advanced, albeit displaying different characteristics, such as different technologies and energy sources, etc. The pyramids. There's a lot of data, and you read the pyramids, mate.
Okay, well, the pyramids, for one, they're perfectly aligned to the cardinal points. There's virtually no subsidence. So the pyramids, they're actually built on a granite bedrock, so they don't sink into the ground. There are no inscriptions inside the pyramids. And the ones that exist are likely fake, because the only cartouche found in the pyramid spelling Khufu's name is a fake, recognizable through a spelling mistake. Nobody really misspelled Pharaoh's name. That was sacrilege. The name was not written with the correct signs: Sif, quail, viper, quail. I'm sorry to go into detail, but it's important, which are representing the consonants K, W, F, W, or Khufu. It had a solar disk array at the beginning instead of the Sif, the K. Instead of the Sif, a circle with several horizontal lines, a circle with single dot in the middle was written there. The name in the pyramid thus is spoken Reufu, not Khufu. This mistake, unthinkable for ancient Egyptian writers, is explainable on the background of 1837, and this is important information. In that year, an academic book about hieroglyphics had been published, Materia Hieroglyphica, in which the name of Khufu was written with a mistake. The lines of the Sif were so close together that they appeared in the print like a massive disc. Another way of writing Re. And it is known that Weiss, who found the inscription, had this book with him on his excavation. The whole 1837 expedition stood under a bad sign. The money had run out and nothing had been found. And nothing had been, in fact, achieved that had been hoped for. So a member of the expedition planned to spice up the results, and he went into the new discovered chambers the moment the blast fumes had vanished. And he painted, equipped with the fatal misprint from the book, some texts to the walls. And there he painted the name, Khufu, as he found it in the book, with a solar disk and not a Sif. The faker, presumably J.R. Hill, also made another mistake. Instead of hieroglyphics, he used a letter system only used for papyri, a handwriting called hieratics. Dave?
We have, around the planet, we have megalithic structures all over the world. Similar tooling marks and similar appearance of structures. That is, the use of stone, the positions of the stone, the style of the walls, and the size of block, the architecture that we would call today the style of building. And that is just something else. In a time when we weren't supposed to be all talking to each other, here appears absolute, unequivocal evidence that there was communication, education, and a way to get around on the planet, which we didn't. Well, they weren't supposed to have been, if that makes sense. One of my favorites is Baalbek. That's the UNESCO-listed World Heritage Site now, with 3 1,000-ton monoliths in the platform itself. Several other 1,000-ton stones are still in the quarry. Now, have you seen photographs of the quarry where there's 30 people sitting on the edge or standing on it? It's on a tilt of like 20 degrees. These stones are so immense, so large, that we could move one, but we'd have to build special equipment to move it. And if we got it there in one piece, we'd be lucky. But of course, we're using our tech. How on earth did they move them? We're talking about the Jupiter temple base of the temple. And these stones aren't on the ground either. They're raised up at least 8-10 foot off the ground, sitting on other rocks or stones that have been milled. Mackie, we've got the extraordinary Inca walls, where all of the stone is a perfect fit. Each stone in the wall is specifically cut for that position only. It isn't like we would do today. Like you call up the quarry, or you look at them online and you go, hey, I need 10,000, 1 by 1 by 4 foot rocks. So can you quarry those and send them to this address? And they go, yeah, that's going to be so much money. You electronically transfer it to them. Voila. Or you pay on invoice, right? Well, no, they didn't do that. Each stone in the walls is unique to that position in the wall. That's just crazy. There's a technology there that we're completely unfamiliar with, because it isn't what we do. It was obviously easy for them. That's the way they did it. Almost like they could melt rock or make it like putty, soften it. But the benefit of it is that there's no mortar, and there's been, many earthquakes, and the walls are still intact. It allows, with no mortar, them to be like flexible, and they can bend and move, and they restore themselves. Tremendous work has gone into. We don't do that today. We don't have rock walls that are impervious to earthquakes, and yet there they stand. What about Meki? Tell me about the underwater structures.
Well, that's another interesting thing. Right? We have underwater structures. Again, the most famous ones, I guess, are in the Indian Ocean, just off the coast of Japan, and in Bimini, which is just off the coast of the Americas, and streets that go into the ocean, and no one knows who's built these things. Right? There's no written record of any of these cultures that clearly were on the then coastline, and then as the waters rose at the end of the last ice age, those structures were flooded. I mean, that's clearly the case, but we have no idea who these people are.
What about Adam's Bridge, Mackie? Same.
Yeah, and again, the people always like to take the Mickey out of no pun intended, out of Adam's Bridge. So the argument is not that people built the entire rock structure that connects Sri Lanka or Ceylon to the southern tip of India. No. This is what they're saying. It's similar to the Florida Keys. So there's a structure of a natural formation that already exists. What is being said, though, that this natural structure was used to build that bridge. Similar again to the Florida Keys, where you have bridges connecting all these islands along. So that's the argument that's being made. Not that all of it was built by people. Which brings us, of course, in fact, some of these structures don't even have myths around them. There's no myth around it. That speaks to their great antiquity, to their great age. Because I mean, if they were at least in living memory of someone within the last 5,000 to 10,000 years, then at least there'd be something there, right? Some legend, something. But nothing. But that does bring us to myths, right? And we have to really look at myths, fairy tales, legends, and such in a different light, because you have to look at them with today's eyes. So today we've got a lot of tech, which is really awesome. We got this, we got that, we got, but if you look at the ancient texts, because when they first came to the attention of the Europeans, which was usually during the 18th or 19th century, that's when colonization happened. You got the translation of Arabian Nights, you've got the translation of the Indian Vedas, etc., etc. They talk about vimanas, flying machines, very specific flying machines that can go on the air, that can go on land, that can go underwater. They're described in quite some detail. We talk about voice-controlled doors. Right? We talk about those. Well, the cave of Alibaba, right? Says "Open Sesame." That's a voice-controlled door where I come from. Okay. Yeah. There's talk about flying chariots, and there's certainly numerous biblical references. They're also similar, very similar, and also very. The interesting thing is they're also very different flood myths. Now, the flood myth is a common theme, but how it played out in different parts of the world was quite different, and therefore not necessarily a cultural artifact that had been inserted later by Christians, for example. Right, and then you have the linguistic similarities across the world. And Charles Berlitz, whose grandfather founded the famous Berlitz language schools across the world, has given numerous examples of language or linguistic similarities across the Pacific, as well as from both sides of the Atlantic. Really interesting linguistic similarities, which can only be explained by cross-pollination, right? And that brings us to the more.
Yeah.
Go on.
Swift.
Go on.
Yeah, in Gulliver's Travels, he mentions Phobos and Deimos. Now, do we know what they are, Maggie?
Well, we do. No.
We do. They're moons of Mars. And they're mentioned in Gulliver's Travels. This is 1726, when they were only discovered in 1877. Like, what?
Yep.
To me, that's almost the Dogon tribe kind of thing.
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you couldn't even guess at it, right?
No.
And the thing is, the critical thing is to understand that he gives their specific properties.
Yeah.
In Gulliver's Travel, right? Now you could guess that that Mars has a moon or two. You could guess at that. Sure, that's okay. I accept that. How on earth would you come up with their specific properties? Yeah. 150 years before they were officially discovered, Dave.
Yeah, I know. Look, we've also got something really cool, and that's the old maps that show geographical features that should not have been known at the time of the map's creation, and awareness of the Earth's curvature before the official discovery. And I think what we're talking about here is the ancient maps. One of them shows Antarctica.
Yeah.
It shows the coastline of Antarctica without ice. And of course, we haven't seen it in our generation and prior to that. And it goes back some time to possibly before the last ice age, that map. And it's known. How on earth would you, even if you did it back in sailing ships in the 1700s, you couldn't see land. Like the North Pole, they thought there was land there, then they discovered it wasn't. Well, you would make the same assumption with the South Pole, since you couldn't see any land from anywhere. It's just a big ice block with snow on it. It doesn't make any sense that you could so accurately draw all of the fjords, Mickey. My favourite bit, the fjords. Got an award for that. I thought you would laugh at least. That's one of my favourite lines. It's one of my favourite lines. And also the awareness of the curvature of the Earth before the official discovery. I think that this is passed on knowledge. Like the other thing, Mickey, in the South Pacific, where the local people had a much more accurate map than Cook did of the islands, because they lived there and they mapped it so accurately that Cook just took a copy, basically xeroxed it, and went, "Oh yeah, cool! I've discovered the islands now," and he confirmed their distances were almost perfect. Because he had a section, they didn't. Anyway, what about look, you talk about the moon, Mackie. It's one of your passions.
Oh, look, like I said, though, I mean, the moon is potentially the largest artificial artifact. Ancient cultures speak of a time before the moon, right? And we know that it rang like a bell when it was hit by NASA on purpose, just to understand. I mean, they did it so they could understand the structure of the moon better. That was really the whole point of it, right? And it reverberated a lot longer than their models could show. There's a lot of things about the moon which don't make sense. We had a whole show cycle around the moon, and it's not just us. I even wrote an article on it, which hasn't been published yet. But the moon is just Isaac Asimov said something that's very true about the moon. It's a lot easier to explain, or maybe I was Arthur C. Clarke. It's a lot easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence. Mm-hmm. So the moon, in its present format, as it exists in like the binary system Earth-Moon, is a significant mystery. It's a significant mystery, and it just doesn't make any sense. In fact, none of the other planets in the solar system have a similar relationship to their moons. It's certainly from a size perspective, but I mean there are so many other things. I don't want to say wrong with the moon, but so amazingly coincidental as to look almost like design, as though the moon were designed to be where it is. And think about solar and lunar eclipses. The moon is just the right size to completely blot out the sun. Just the right size. Do you know the odds of that?
Well, it's 400 times smaller.
Yeah,
but it's
and 400 times closer.
That's right.
The odds are incredibly small against something like that happening, right? So, in fact, it goes further than just the moon. Dave, why don't you tell us about Bode's law?
Yeah, if you think about when you hear 1 AU, 2 AU, 3 AU, every mass of every planet has a particular amount of AUs, and that's the Earth. It's all centric around the Earth mass. And Bode's law suggests that all of those masses added up, actually, of all the planets, position themselves very well, except there's a gap. It's a very bizarre gap, and that's the asteroid belt. Yeah. All of the planets except for Neptune follow Bode's law. And of course, there should be enough matter in the asteroid belt to form a planet. But it's said by the Anunnakis, the text from Samaria that was transcribed, that says that Earth was in a different orbit, was struck by another planet, and it's found its current location. And it could be that is the remnants of another planet. But Neptune also, it doesn't follow Bode's law, and this is something quite extraordinary. That, like the placement of gas distributed in a vessel equally, or everything with the same charge that spreads out to be equidistant from each other. Yeah, we have a very similar thing about mass and rotation around the sun. There's a little graph. I'm just going to put it on the screen so it can be seen by people. So Bode's law, comparatively with the actual distance, so Mercury is 0.39, but Bode's law says it should be 0.4, and that makes it rounded up. Venus, 0.72, Bode's law, 0.7. Earth, 1. Well, of course, it's Earth-centric, so yes, it's going to be 1 for Bode's law. Mars, 1.52, Bode's law, 1.6. That's so close. The asteroid belt, and that's meant to have a Bode's law of 2.8, but we can't actually measure the whole distance. Right? Jupiter, 5.2 for Bode's law. Saturn, 9.54. Bode's law puts it at 10. Uranus, 19.19, and Bode's law is 19.6. Neptune, 30.10, and there isn't a Bode's law for it. It just doesn't work. Pluto, 39.5, and Bode's law was 38.7. Planet X, 77.2, Mackie.
Yep. And
every single week there's something else that comes up about Planet X, and one of the most recent ones was a scientist who was looking through the data from the 80s, the first infrared telescope that went into space, was looking at everything. And he found some data on what is now called, or to be announced as Planet X, but it's iffy. And guess what? There's the music. That's the end of the show.
That's the end.
This is the end of episode 504, The Hypothesis Part 6. This is David Mick showing us that out. See you next week when one of us is going to say...